Welcome to Your Redemptive Birth, the birth story podcast where we hear directly from women who have journeyed from medicalized births to natural ones. I'm Sarah, and together we'll hear from women who have reclaimed birth. Their stories are marked by healing, strength, and deep trust in their bodies. If these stories resonate with you, I'd love for you to follow the podcast and leave a review so more women can find hope here. And for more redemptive birth tips and encouragement, come connect with me on Instagram at Your Redemptive Birth. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team for guidance specific to your pregnancy and birth. This is Your Redemptive Birth. Hey, honey. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It's kids after the dark. Let's restart.
Yeah, our kids are asleep and we're going to just do a little birth conversation this evening. So I shared my birth stories last week. And it felt fitting to do another little departure from the usual content of redemptive birth stories and have you share your side of things. Because so often women want their husbands to be on board, their partner to be on board with their birth decisions, but there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of just like a lack of understanding about physiological birth, I think. And kind of our journey through that, because we also went through that too. And so we're going to unpack my two different, birth experiences. I obviously have already shared this story, so it's more from your perspective this time. We're going to talk honestly about fear, safety, surrender, advocacy, and what it really looks like for a man to support his woman through intense physiological birth. If you're navigating fears around birth or wondering how husbands can move from anxious observer to steady, grounded support, this conversation is for you. Gorgeous. So why don't we go back to me getting pregnant for the first time and just kind of heading into that birth. Where were you? Tell me who you were, what you were prepared for, what you were worried about, all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, the getting pregnant part was really fun. Basically, I just graduated college. We just got married and we found out you were pregnant 2 days after my birthday. And so it's a fun little surprise. And yeah, I didn't know there was a lot of change happening, a lot of life changes. We moved to Dallas and I started my first full-time job and we were away from family, friends. COVID was happening. So there was just a lot of change and everything going on. So it was honestly just like kind of an addition of just like all these new things coming at you that you were learning and navigating. And so the first birth and like pregnancy, there was a lot of changes that I just didn't know. It's not like I'm more of a finance, accounting, business person. And so I didn't really know all the things that would happen when it came to birth and how it would change you and how much you actually like need to rest and how much morning sickness and just like, there's just a lot of adjustments there. And I would say the biggest thing that I didn't do in the first birth was just learning about it all. Mm-hmm. I kind of let you lead that. You did a lot of research yourself. And I think we looked at a bunch of different providers and midwives and just kind of we're trying to get a feeling. And I know with our current financial situation, we needed to go to a place that took our insurance. And not a lot of the midwives at that point took our specific insurance.
Yeah, I want to add a little caveat there too, though, and say that you can make anything a priority. Like back then, we decided not to make that a priority, honestly, because, there's always a way. Like we were just talking about this morning or yesterday, but you were like, I would go into debt for $5,000 to have the birth that you want to have. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like think of all the things people go into debt for. And it's not, in the grand scheme of things, $4,000 to $5,000 for the birth of your child, that's a big deal. And I think, definitely like in my second birth too, that there was like kind of an unwillingness, though that money felt like, what am I paying them for if I don't really want them near me? So anyway, but that's just an aside. That was the kind of the choice that we made back then, was like, all right, well, we're not going to make this priority. We're going to do, I think that's such a caveat or like a cop out people use. Well, they don't take my insurance. Like, like
Yeah,
where there's a will,
I
there's
don't
a
know.
way.
It definitely helps out
Yeah.
financially when they do take your
No
insurance.
kidding. Yeah. I
I also was in a tough spot, so I don't think I was the best supportive person throughout your first pregnancy. I had a lot of growing up to do, and so, but I went to all the appointments. I listened to everything they said. I think there was also a lot of you just navigating things, and there was times when we would go to the midwives, to their facility, as you mentioned in your stories. It was like swanky, felt all cool and everything, not so
yeah,
clinical.
yeah.
And
But just clinical enough.
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, I was birthing in obviously they were hospital midwives, so
yeah.
it was a very medical
Yeah.
experience.
So basically, we would go to the appointments, just kind of listen to what they said. Sarah had a lot of questions. She always has a lot of questions, and that's the whole point of her wanting to be informed. And so, don't feel bad for asking questions. Sometimes I hesitate to ask questions, but the more you ask, the more you understand. There's things that you will learn that you didn't expect. And so I would go to those appointments, I'd learn. There was also a lot of times where there was this like, oh, high blood pressure or some other like thing that they would alert you about, and then that kind of got you to go in a spiral.
I just so that people know, because I didn't talk about this in my first birth story.
Hmm.
The birth, their office was on like the second level of a building. So you'd walk in. I was, heavily pregnant, walking up the stairs, and then they would immediately take my blood pressure.
Yeah. And
So
I also think it
yeah,
was you had a couple of times when you
and then it
already
made
had
me
high blood
nervous.
pressures, then you had the
Well,
nervous.
no, because I never actually genuinely had high blood pressure. It was always me walking upstairs, and then the first time that happened, and then they said, "You might have borderline high blood pressure." And then I got nervous, and so then every time after that was like a nervous thing. Right,
Yeah,
was
that's
just
what I
what
was
you're
saying.
saying.
Yeah.
But
Because every time at home, you would take it and be totally
yeah, and
fine.
I would take it at home, and it was totally normal. But anyway, yeah, blood pressure is not, something to mess around with, but, like, I genuinely didn't have high blood pressure, and it was just a silly little snafu. They started taking my blood pressures at the end of appointments after I was kinda calm, we talked for a while, and then I was obviously not out of breath walking up the stairs,
Yeah.
heavily pregnant. And that's another that you bring up a great point, that there was time to ask these questions, because though these were hospital midwives that, we were working with, my appointments really they would talk to me as long as I needed to talk, and sometimes it could have been 45 minutes, sometimes it was not, sometimes it was 15 minutes and I was in and out. That's, like, the difference between the midwifery model of care and, like, the obstetric model of care. You're gonna get, like, 5 minutes with an OB, whereas I would get up to, like, an hour, if I had serious questions and needed to work through some things, like, they were willing to do that. So, anyway, I think that's just an important thing to note as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I'm not shorter than her. I'm just in a shorter chair.
No, you're not short.
But basically, yeah. So I felt like for me, I did the bare minimum, honestly. And it showed up during her birth. And so during her birth, I was an accountant at the time. And so I was in the middle of month end close, which is a really busy time. And her water broke. And I was like, I don't know. Her mom and sister were already down here. And so I was like, I don't know if there needs to be a bunch of hands. And so I just didn't know what I should be doing. It was the first
Yeah,
time
you genuinely didn't know
I
how to
didn't know.
support a laboring woman, even though it was me, it was the
Yeah.
love of your life, you still were kind of like maybe a deer in headlights kind of a situation a little bit.
Yeah, and that just went to me not planning properly and doing my due diligence of learning how to be a supportive partner. So the first birth, I wasn't as supportive as I should have been. And when we were at the hospital, if you've listened to her stories, if you have not, it was a very long process. There was just a lot going on. And I ultimately had the mindset of, oh, I'm here to like hold your hand, be there when you need me, but mostly like the midwives and nurses will take care of you and be there and help you do the birthing. And so that was just my mindset at the time. Obviously, that did not help in terms of having a physiological natural birth because I didn't even know what it all took. And so that was kind of the first birth. There was also it was also just I didn't know how to speak up. I didn't know what I could say yes and no to, mostly avoid a lot of confrontation. But as I've aged and learned, the second birth, it changes. And so, but luckily you also are very stern and stand up for yourself.
I
And
haven't always been that way. That's a skill that
yeah,
I've learned.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely had to hone that skill as I've
But again, I think the first time we were both really young and we didn't like, we
yeah,
were both people pleasers. And
for
so
sure.
we didn't stand up. And so, yeah, the birth kind of just happened to you. And so I know this is something that you talk about a lot. And so in the second birth, the second pregnancy, this was a much different conversation. She spent 3 years just diving into her birth story, what happened, really trying to figure out just everything about birth and physiological birth and natural birth and uh, just really preparing. And so, we just weren't ready as parents as well, but also to experience another birth for that 3 years. And so when you were pregnant again, pregnancy didn't change much. It was
Yeah,
still rough. And you started out with COVID. And so that was a little tougher there. But the the amount of research I did was a little bit different. And so, I mean, again, I relied on you because you spent a lot of time doing it. So I just asked you questions and then just kind of look up my own questioning. But this time we were planning to have a midwife. And so you interviewed a bunch of midwives and
like
you
a home
just,
birth midwife.
yeah, home birth midwife. We were planning home birth and you just didn't really find anyone that you felt you connected with enough. And again, as we mentioned, we didn't make it a priority to make the financial, either take a loan out or figure out how to make the money to pay for it. And again, would absolutely change that. And so basically what a lot of it came down to was like the two kind of big differences where we didn't really go to any appointments. We went to one to just like do an ultrasound at like 20 weeks and we got here's what the sex is of the baby, but we didn't even open it. We waited and will not change that for every kid we have.
I
We're
know. I love being
always gonna
surprised.
wait. But I really noticed the difference in that you weren't psyching yourself out. You weren't worrying about it. You were more worried about your like inputs. So you were eating a healthier diet. You were up and active more, which is just natural when you have a kid that you have to chase
Right,
around.
yeah.
But you were just up and doing things. And so you naturally just kind of were in a better pregnancy state, I felt like, and better mindset. And so for me in the second pregnancy, though, is all my research and questions came down to, okay, well, if we're birthing at home and we're preparing for basically a free birth,
Yeah.
that's what we were doing. We were preparing for a free birth. And
by the way, we're not telling anybody to do that. We're just simply sharing our experience. And it was certainly the right thing for us. I had a very joyful, easy pregnancy aside from the nausea at the beginning. But
mhm,
like, it was very straightforward. I was healthy. I was comfortable. I was at peace with all of it, and it was definitely the right thing for us. But
yeah.
anyway,
And I
there's
think
the
that was that it wasn't the right thing in the beginning though. Like there
right.
was a lot
There was a
of
lot of learning and ebbing and flowing.
and it's just like anything when you're talking with your partner and discussing, like you have to really understand the decision you're making. And I think it really comes down to me trusting you.
I was
And
gonna say that.
I
We were just talking
really,
about that.
yeah, I really trust that you've always been in tune with your body. And so, yeah, if you're not somebody who understands your body and is really into it, like you, you know yourself really well and um, you know that. And so it's really easy to trust you and just kind of follow your lead in that. And so when you said you wanted a free birth, obviously I had a lot of pushback, but then you slowly
Well, let's
just,
break that down a little
okay.
bit. What was the pushback? What were you worried about? Because I think that this kind of is the crux of here. Let me just read this other question so that everybody can kind of know where we're heading with this. Okay. Many husbands deeply fear something bad happening during birth. How did you personally work through fears around safety and learn to stay calm and grounded? Love that question.
Mm, I would say I had a lot of fears around what you have talked a lot about, at least to me, is just on all the risks. And as somebody who enjoys statistics and just like understanding them, I always pushed you on statistics like,
Yeah.
well, what are the statistics like? And I was fearful of like, oh, what about the 1%? What if that does happen? And I think ultimately a lot of those like all the fears came to like, what if something bad happens, and just like creating a plan for it. And I think like there was oh, well, what if the baby's breech? Like I'm not trained in breech babies. Like I don't
Yeah.
know. But I think ultimately what came down to me going from this like fearful person was just talking to you, understanding the absolute risks and just seeing where you were at and just slowly coming to terms on it on my own. But it was also knowing that we are very fortunate that we live reasonably close to a hospital. And so I knew that, okay, if anything at all really was like something that was an emergency that we had to go, like we were just
You'd be
three,
there.
4 minutes away from a hospital. And I also knew that like your sister's labor and delivery nurse,
Yeah.
and she was, going to be nearby. So again, like I just
Mhm.
had the safety of knowing that there were people and like
Mhm.
the hospital that were nearby
Yeah.
that would support and help. And so not feeling fully alone. And just the two of us, even though, I think it still would have been fine even if I didn't have anybody, but just like
Yeah. Yeah.
trusting.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the crux of it too, is like it's just this deep cultural misunderstanding of what women's bodies are meant to do and what they're capable of doing, and a deep distrust in that. So rather than trust a woman's body, people now are more apt to trust a physician in charge of a woman's body, if that makes sense. That's, I think, the biggest hurdle that has to be crossed is like, do you really trust my body? As a husband, thinking about his wife and their baby, or, and where do your fears about birth, something bad happening in birth come from? Often it's like the horror stories that we hear, it's the way it's portrayed in movies growing up. Like, if you haven't spent any time watching physiological birth, just in on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, which I did. I showed you some birds.
Oh, I mean, you would always send me on Instagram natural births to watch.
Yeah.
And just like when you were doing the dishes or
Mhm.
something, you would have your podcast going
Just
and I'd be
always listening to
listening.
birth stories. Yeah.
And so I think one thing that I've just realized in any part of your life is that sometimes you just don't even know it's attainable. You hear all the bad. And so not knowing something is possible and attainable
Right.
is just, that's honestly the beginning part
Mhm.
of it. And so, like, knowing and understanding that there are so many women
Mhm.
who have natural births and who trust their bodies and can do it. And it like that's honestly the beginning of it. You have to believe that it's also possible. And you also have to believe it's possible that you can do it. And again, I love the quote that you have of like, women have been doing this for
Forever.
forever. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be here.
Yeah.
And so, and there wasn't all these medical interventions and everything in the past. And so, like,
Yeah.
it's all
And
there.
that's not to knock medicine when you need it. It's not to knock, interventions when you need them. They're there when you need them. So
Yeah.
it's great. And then people's pushback on that then is usually, well, what if if it all happens so fast and then there isn't enough time to get help, if you need it, say you're having a home birth. And that's fair for a few different interventions, and that for me this made the biggest difference was learning about and this isn't to oversimplify birth at all. Once you really start delving into the main true birth emergencies that birth workers are looking out for, home birth midwives and obstetricians, like, I don't want to again generalize and say that these are the only emergencies that can happen, but these are like the big daddies, if you will. I don't even know. But, like, so, and there's really no skipping that. I always say that. There's no shortcut around learning about this stuff. You kinda just have to fill in these knowledge gaps until the knowledge outweighs the fear around it. So, for me, that meant that the main true birth emergencies that I was really kind of coming down to, like, "Okay, here's the worst that can happen, and what's my plan then?" Kind of a thing. Um, I learned about shoulder dystocia, learning about placental abruptions. That's when your placenta starts to separate from the uterus before the baby's born. Cord prolapse. That's when the cord comes out before the baby comes out. So then the baby's head or presenting part, whether that's the butt or the head, compresses the cord then as it's starting to. the baby's emerging, and that can cut off the baby's blood supply and oxygen and all that. Uterine rupture, I knew that, even women who've had prior C-sections, that the risk is still below 1% for someone who's had one C-section. So learning about all of these things, learning about the statistics behind them, the absolute numbers, not the relative risks, but the actual absolute overall numbers, really started to crowd out all of the fear around what could possibly go wrong, because I knew what could go wrong. Those were all the things. And again, not to oversimplify, that's why there are whole specialties dedicated to understanding all of these things. But once I really kind of got like the gist of all that, it's not that complicated. It's not that hard to understand, like we're capable of understanding these things, and just kind of having the baseline even knowledge and understanding of the numbers is really what helped me to put my mind at ease. And I think as a byproduct of that, it was able to put your mind at ease, that I was at ease about it. And yeah, like you didn't become like a birth expert in order to feel comfortable with
No.
me choosing to do this. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I
Yeah.
don't think that that's necessarily the role of a husband or a partner. They don't have to become suddenly become like a
Yeah.
physiological birth
Yeah.
expert. But you did understand, though, that it was very important that I felt safe. That was paramount to my labor and birth working well, was that I felt safe. And you understood that it needed to be dark and quiet, and all of these types of things that would help my hormones flow the best. Like, so yeah, maybe you can talk through what that actually looked like. I actually wanted to be kind of by myself for a lot of my second labor. I talk about it in the Birth Stories podcast, but I like stood next to the bed. I labored on the toilet. I labored in the shower. I was really, though, there came a point where you are kind of trying to like outrun the intensity. You're trying to distance yourself from the intensity. But the problem is the more that you do that, the harder it becomes than just surrendering and just softening and just accepting that it's happening, even though it's really hard. It's really, really hard. But I hit a wall at one point, and that's when I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, and I didn't think anything was wrong. I knew I was okay. I knew baby was okay. But I was like, I can't do this. I know I'm going to have, I'm telling myself I'm going to have this super long labor and I need an epidural. And maybe talk through what that transition looked like and how you supported me then through that.
Yeah, I would say before I talk into that, one thing is having a plan for if you have children, having a plan for your children. We kind of did, but like just having like somebody that can quickly get there, that just allows you as a partner to be there more for your spouse and not have to figure out the logistics there.
Yeah.
But getting into, your second labor, the birth. So you started out at home, like you said, transitioning from bathroom to shower to bed, just kind of moving around. And I remember when we talk about birth, you've said that it's similar to sex. And so with that, the sex part is about feeling comfortable and feeling all the good hormones that
Feeling
lets your
safe enough to let your body do that,
Yeah. And so like when you're really turned on, like in sex, then you are more open and like it's like you're
Right.
softer and like it allows for, and so like similar to pregnancy or to birth, it's the same thing. And so I knew when you felt that defeat of like, oh, it's going to be like the first birth, it's going to be a 48 plus hour
Ordeal.
like marathon, that I saw it in your eyes. And your mom was there and she said, let's just try and go to the hospital. And so
Yeah.
we went to the hospital. And I know like your stance on cervical exams is, again, do what you feel most comfortable with. It's
Right.
not saying no, don't get them, or yes, go get them. Like, it's do what you feel comfortable, what will be the best to help you. And so in that moment, you felt like a cervical exam
Was the right
was the
choice
right
right then.
choice.
Yeah.
Because
I
I
said
felt
in my
like there was
MS.
nothing to lose though, because you
Right.
felt like
I
you
was
were
like, screw
already,
it. I'm getting an epidural, whatever. Just,
yeah.
let's see what's happening.
Yeah. But then when, the
Yeah.
nurse checked, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I just saw it like, no way. I'm like, you were like, I'm that far? Like you were just
But
kind of like,
again, cervical exams don't mean anything about how far or how close you are to giving birth or not. But for me, having, as I mentioned in my last birth story, I got an epidural at like 1 centimeter with my first birth. So I didn't understand any progress beyond being 1 centimeter open to me felt like, whoa, my body's doing it. Like I
Hmm.
actually am in labor. Like it wasn't about how close I might be to giving birth. It was about, oh, I actually am in the process. Like, because I kind of started to gaslight myself that maybe like I'm just not doing it. My body's not doing it. It's
Yeah.
not working. But then when I heard it is because my cervix is actually opening, that was really helpful. But here's the crux of it. If he had chucked and I was 1 or 2 centimeters,
Yeah, you would have
I would have
easily just, yeah.
felt like, oh, just same as last time. Like,
Yeah.
okay, guess not. Never mind. It
You would have
wasn't, yeah,
immediately went into the
but it,
epidural.
right.
You
But
wouldn't have waited.
exactly. Like, but it wasn't about, again, that's such a problem because what if I was 30 minutes away from
Yeah.
being 5 or 6 or whatever centimeters? The cervix is just doesn't tell you when you're going to give birth. It doesn't tell you how far along you are. It was just simply a moment in time, but it happened to be that that moment in time was enough to reinvigorate my brain and like, it was just a little push I needed to go, my body is in labor. Like, I guess it
Yeah.
is actually
Yeah.
in labor. Like, I'm doing it. My body's doing it. And that was all I needed in order to just, keep going. And how funny is that it is all mental. It's all mental
Yeah.
because if you're convinced that you can do it, you will. If
Hmm.
you're convinced that you can't do it, you won't.
And that's another thing is like the time it took for us to get to the hospital. Like like you probably could have birthed at home sooner. I mean,
I
this is
know.
all
Who knows?
speculatory and
Speculatory. I love your made up words. But yeah,
speculative, whatever.
yeah.
And
There's no way to know what could have, should have, would
yeah,
have happened. I'm grateful that it happened this way because
yeah,
now we know how to navigate
yeah.
the hospital.
And so yeah, just kind of getting into the hospital side of things
Yeah,
and
what was
birth. And so uh, we got into our room. You couldn't get the epidural right away, so that turned into a blessing. Like
which I still didn't really want it at that point in
yeah,
labor.
like they asked, and you said,
I just needed more
I just
time.
need a little bit more time. And then I think they came in maybe one or two other times and asked.
Which that's another great tool is to not say yes or no. You don't need to give a definitive yes or no. Just like I just want to wait a little bit. I
Yeah.
just need a little bit more time,
Hmm.
or like I said in a previous podcast that I was on, let's just give it an hour. And
Hmm.
that's from a book called Natural Hospital Birth by Cynthia Gabriel. Definitely recommend. It's a good book. But what happens if we just wait an hour? And I'm, deep in labor land. I'm not really audibleizing lots of things
Hmm.
or whatever. I'm not really uh able to do a lot of words. I was
It's more
able
like
to say I was able to get out because you don't even want your neocortex, your thinking brain really engaged at all. And so I really like there would be a little, we're such mammals, we're such creatures. Like any little disturbance does shift your brain out of that laborland mode because you're scanning for threats,
hmm.
like we're just like any other animal in the wild. And so anytime a nurse did come in, my brain scanned for threat and I like look up, and then they're like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And I'm just like, no, just more time. Like that's all I pretty much said, right? Eyes closed, like not really looking at anybody,
Yeah.
you know. But yeah,
Yeah.
you keep going, keep going.
And so it was also really helpful to have your mom in there. Like it does
Oh,
take a group. I know you wanted to be by yourself, but
no,
it
I don't
does.
think I did. In reality, I convinced myself in before labor that I didn't want anybody there except for you. But the reality is that I've heard it said that humans can be like elephant birthers or cat birthers because elephants love to birth with other elephants around them. They like their
Mm,
having their group of women around them. But cats, obviously, they like to be like back in a shoebox in the back of a closet. They like to be by themselves. Sometimes you can be both. Some women are elephants and some women are cats. And as it turns out, I think I'm a bit of an elephant. As much as I am an introvert in real life, during birth, it was so helpful to have my mom to look up into her face, which by the way, she had all, I've have two siblings, so all three of her births were very medical. She was pretty young, so like she had, it was back in the 90s, so
and
she
even
didn't
all of
have,
her sisters were
yeah,
also
all of
all
her
like there was no
sisters.
history
Well,
of
my Aunt Betty was very
yeah.
natural birth minded, and she was so my mom was one of 8 children, but her mom had never had like an unmedicated birth. Like she was like from the twilight sleep era where she was getting put to sleep. I remember right after right after I gave birth, and everybody in my family was so proud of me, which was
Mhm.
just such a beautiful thing. Like, all of my aunts and my whole family really was really excited, but my nana texted me, and she was like, and she's 90, what, 92,
Yeah,
91? She's
something like that.
yeah.
She's 90s,
She
yeah.
texted me and she was like, "Sarah, you are such a warrior. Like,
Yeah.
I wish that I could have at least been conscious for one of my births," was what
Mhm.
she said. She's had 8 babies and wasn't awake for
Yeah.
any of them.
Yeah.
And, just, like, how sad that is, you know? And then so my mom, same thing, obviously wasn't twilight sleep, this was the '90s now, but
Yeah.
she'd had all Pitocin and epidural situations, you know? My and so but, I mean, my mom was such a great support, you know?
Mhm.
She was so, like, she believed I could do it,
Mhm.
and she was so ready to be like, there was just no fear. She was very present and yeah, anyway, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but,
Which, I
um
mean, it does bring up a point because she was one of the ones early on that, like, didn't believe it was possible, and so,
oh,
like,
yeah.
it
Mhm.
was this, like, oh,
A
like
beautiful turning point moment
yeah,
for us.
yeah, it
Mhm.
was, but I think what is really helpful is that your mom's also really good into ambiance and making settings feel really comfortable and, like,
Yeah.
and
Not
so
that there was much time for that because, I mean, we got into the
no, I know,
hospital
but,
and,
like,
like, I gave birth
she
pretty
made
quickly.
sure again that I could focus on you
Yeah.
and be, like, rubbing your back and just, like, being there and, like, doing whatever I can to make you feel more comfortable,
Yeah.
even though you can't feel comfortable, but,
No, yeah.
she, like, made sure the lights were down. She kind of blocked the doors so people couldn't just barge in and just, like, start flipping on lights and everything, and, like, she really protected your
Yeah,
space,
she
and
did.
so and I think that's the thing is, like, you I think what you wanted, it wasn't nobody in there, but you wanted only people you really knew and felt
Yeah,
comfortable with
yeah.
because you knew that's the only way you'd feel open and,
Safe enough to
safe enough
open.
to yeah,
Yeah.
and so basically, you were going through it and, couple times we suggested different positions and you tried them
Right.
and that's when you finally got into your position and it was almost like you were doing like I was like the quarterback ready to catch the baby.
Right
And
behind you.
I just remember one thing. And men, if your wife like always think about like, okay, if she asked me something and it would make her feel like tense or clamp up or
Yeah.
whatever it may be, lie. And so like she kept asking like, am I pooping?
I could feel like I felt like I was pooping, but I was also like, but also a baby coming out can feel like
Yeah.
pooping. And I knew he was coming into my vagina. I felt that his head was right there. I knew he was about I was when he started crowning, like that was amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But
But yeah, I
yeah,
was
like
totally
you
pooping and I never even knew. Didn't
yeah.
even know until a couple of months ago. And
Yeah.
you were my yeah, you swiped my poop away right off my butt. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Well, yeah, I just knew if I said that if you were like it would mess with you
Yeah.
mentally. And so you have to be conscious of that and you can make fun little memories of it later on and come clean with your lies. But yeah, it's just like being that person and honestly, that was only part of the battle. Like
Yeah.
the baby came out and you were roaring, and that's when 10 nurses barged in and just kind of,
Yeah, like, the birth was very straightforward. Like,
yeah,
he's out, like, he came out, and it was
yeah,
beautiful, and but then kind of the hard part
yeah.
happened, yeah.
Well, no, it was just like even when like his head was out,
Yeah.
they barged in and they were like, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. And I mean, also, what do you expect? Like, she's
No, of
trying
course. What do
to.
you this is what they do in the hospital. This is
Yeah,
how they manage
yeah,
birth in hospitals.
they need to have control
They wanna have
and
control over it,
yeah,
yeah.
and so they came in, said, "What are you doing?" And, that's when, they still like, I was still there, I helped, and I know the OB kinda helped, and he came out, and you grabbed him and immediately pulled him up to you,
Yeah, you guys passed him, like, kind
and
of
you're like, "It's a boy!"
oh, it was so great. Thank you
Yeah,
for that.
and then we were just on the ground crying and
It
holding
was
each
so
other and
good.
everything, but that moment was kind of ruined in a way, and, because there was a lot of tension and just, like, anger at us, and,
For just wanting to birth our baby the way we wanted to.
well, you birthed the
Well,
baby.
I know.
I did
But, like,
um,
we knew we were okay,
yeah,
and there was no fear, and no, we understand that that's what you get in a hospital, so it's not like I have any hard feelings about it, it's more
yeah,
just like anybody who you have to go
you have
in
to be
knowing that,
prepared.
be
Yeah,
prepared for that. Yeah. anyway.
And I think part of that is that, they have their systems, they have their processes, they have their habits. Like, people will start rubbing the baby's back or start cleaning them off, or like
Yeah.
snip the cord right away, because like that's just their habits. They just have their routines and kind of
Yeah.
go through it. And so like, we had to really advocate for ourselves. And so even if you have a plan, even I know we didn't have a plan because we didn't have that set up, but even if you do have a plan, I know people still have to like advocate for themselves and push for the things
Yeah.
that they want.
I want to also say that because you said even though we didn't quote like actually have a plan or whatever for
Hmm.
that, but here's the thing though, is that yeah, no, we didn't have a written down birth plan, but I mentioned this also a couple weeks ago in another podcast. I keep bringing it up, but and this was from the unmedicated girlies or something on Instagram. Her name is Lizzie. I don't know if it was her, if it was somebody else on her page or something, but it was this great analogy about a birth plan. Think about back in high school when you were given a teensy little note card and you had to cram in all of the facts for that test. You were given one note card for a test and you could put all of it was like a cheat sheet. You could put all the stuff on it. But and you would cram that thing full. You would like write every little last bit that you felt might be important. And the reality was that when it came time for that test, you knew all of the stuff so well because you had learned it, you had studied it. And so that was us in the hospitals. Like, we had studied the stuff. We knew the interventions. We knew the emergencies. We
Hmm.
knew all the stuff. And we were very prepared to say no. Whilst labor landing for
Hmm.
me, didn't have many words. I could get out yes, no, couple short answer, things like that.
Hmm.
But if there needed any more clarification, you were able to do that,
Yeah.
and then you're right, post birth I kind of had to zap back to reality. Like, there
Yeah.
was no, if you see the difference between home births and hospital births, home birth, you kind of languish that moment when your baby is born and you're just, you come back to earth is what so many people say. And for me, I kind of had to come back to earth like ASAP, like on a
Yeah.
rocket ship, so
Yeah.
that I could be ready to defend myself
Yeah.
against whatever I knew was coming next,
Yeah.
which is also a bummer,
Yeah.
but know that going in, if you want an unmedicated birth, if you don't want all the stuff, there's, you got to be prepared for that, which means you're zapping back to reality like ASAP after birth.
Yeah.
Or at least that was my experience of it. Anywho.
And some of those
Yeah.
things were like they immediately wanted to rub his back and like get him
Yeah.
to, and it's like you knew what to do and you wanted to do it yourself. And like,
Right. And there also, I talk about this in the other podcast or in my birth stories last week. There was a certain extent of like, I don't want to be, because look at like, we're already free birthers. We're already, I birthed him pretty much before anybody even walked in the room. They're already mad about things. And like, we're not tension people. Like, we don't like confrontation. And I knew, okay, if I keep pushing back and telling them no, no, no for every little last thing, like, I don't want this to become like a power struggle between
hmm.
us, because I don't want that. I know that they can take babies. They can,
Hmm.
I didn't want them to take him from me. I didn't want them to whatever. So I like kind of let them rub his back and stuff. And whatever that, is kind of what it is. But again, like, what a bummer that
Yeah.
we have to kind of negotiate which stuff we're willing to put up with in order to have, the most intact mother baby experience that we can have. But I keep interrupting you.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to it, this is where it gets back into the point of like, if a midwife is costing you $5,000,
Mm.
like it may as well be worth to go into debt. And that's again, it's a
Yeah.
decision you have to make.
Right.
None of this is telling you go do this, go do that.
No.
It's you have to understand and weigh what you are comfortable with. And
Yeah.
so, like that looks different for everyone.
Right.
Like some
Mhm.
people, they want to have the medications, they want to have the
Right. Yeah.
interventions,
Mhm.
and they're okay with that. And there's
There's
nothing wrong
nothing
with that.
wrong with that.
And then
No.
there's also people who don't want that and they understand and they've done the research, they've done the, reading the books, the courses, the listening to the podcasts. And so, but I think that if you're going into a hospital setting, you have to know and understand that there's a little bit more than if you were to just home birth.
A whole lot more. Yeah.
And so it's knowing what you need to prepare for the specific environment that you're giving birth in.
Right.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
that was kind of your second birth.
Yeah, that was the second birth. Okay, I like this question. What does it actually look like for a husband to become a clear channel during birth instead of bringing panic, tension, or control into the room?
Huh. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm a pretty steady guy. I don't
Yeah,
like to,
that's why I married you.
I don't really like to show like my fear or tension. Um, but I would say that the reason you fear and have tension is because you don't know. And
Right.
so if I don't know what's going on or I don't have a plan, like that's when you have the biggest fear and you don't
Mhm.
know and you can't be calm. And at the same time, even if there are crazy things that happen, like we're very fortunate that there wasn't like a crazy thing where you did need an intervention like a C-section or anything like that. But I know that staying calm no matter what, even when the stakes are high and you like as a partner, you have to be that
Mhm.
because if you're freaking out, then your partner's going to be freaking out and worrying about you, and they shouldn't have to be worrying about you. And so you have to have the confidence in yourself to be able to figure out
Yeah.
any situation that comes up. And if that's calling somebody,
Mhm.
or just like prepping yourself, like you have to prep yourself. Like
Yeah.
even though I didn't have to become a birth educator or birth knowledge person, there is still a lot that you have to understand and learn so that if things do come up, that you are also prepped and ready for what to do in those cases. And if you're not, to still stay calm. I don't know how to stay calm. I just do it. I don't know.
Well, no, actually, it's funny that you bring that up. Well, not funny. I mean, it's very, very relevant, but mirror neurons. This is a real thing. We really do reflect back what other people give us. And so whatever's going on, yeah, like you just maintained that calm that you never reflected back at me. Maybe I was feeling a little fear, I was like, "No, this is gonna be such a long labor." But you didn't really reflect that fear back at me. You were like, "Are you sure this is really what you want?" Because, you were really like steady, very calm. And that was like key. That was crucial. You never once, because if you had reflected back at me instead, for example, like, oh no, okay, yeah, no, let's get you right there. Like, yeah, okay, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. You never did that. You maintained exactly the energy that I needed to be feeling in my body,
Hmm.
And so that was incredibly important and powerful and helpful. And so, yeah, yeah, men don't need to become like birth advocates and experts, but they do need to learn how to manage their fear, which again, the fear is because you don't understand or know. So that means you do have to do a little bit of groundwork, a little bit of
Hmm.
research. Not, again, not,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's not getting a PhD or
no,
anything like that. Or, um,
some groundwork,
but yeah,
but
there's,
then it's mostly the energy you bring.
yeah.
It's mostly your, yeah,
Yeah.
how you are managing your
And I
stuff.
and I think from like principles and frameworks, like the thing I thought about the most, and I can't stop thinking about it, and I'm gonna say it again, but is like, what are the conditions that you need to have to
Mhm.
feel calm, peaceful, and like relaxed?
Yeah,
And so like when in like for sex, it's the same thing. And
it
so like,
is.
how do I make you feel that same way? And so like, would me freaking out about this, would this make you feel, excited? No, like,
No.
and so just, yeah, just focusing on that, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, last question, final question. What practical things helped you support me well during labor, emotionally, spiritually, and physically? And what advice would you give to other men preparing for birth with their wives?
So this kind of just goes by what you are spiritually. And so for us, we pray to God and Jesus. And so that would especially add more into this time around.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I need more
Because
prayer.
when you really leave it up and trust in God, it's something bigger than yourself. And
Mhm.
so not putting all the weight on your own shoulders is really important, and knowing that what is going to happen, that there's a plan and there's a way to figure it out. And it's not just on you. That also goes into making sure that your wife has support, but you also have support. And so like having your mom there was a big support for
For
me.
you.
It felt like I didn't also have to figure it out all on my own, even though I would have been able to, but it's using the people that out there that also believe in what you're wanting. And so like if I went to somebody who didn't believe in a natural physiological birth, and like I remember I called your friend Emma and I called your sister and
Yeah.
like I called people and kind of asked them, hey, like what do you think? Like how should I approach this?
Yeah.
And so having people there is really important to just also be there better. And
Yeah, I think there's like men sometimes think that they have to like shoulder the burden
yeah,
all
and
by
do it all
themselves and do
themselves.
that.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, you're right. Sometimes it can be wise to share that to the, that quote unquote burden.
I mean, it's not a burden. We have the easiest part of the birth experience. So like it's the least we could do is burden something.
It's like
But
a chance for you to step into your, you know, masculinity or role as father.
yeah, but I think there's a big thing in masculinity and a role of like, oh, you have to just figure out yourself and you have to do it yourself. You can't use anybody else. And I think that that's wrong. Like you absolutely should reach out to people to help.
I agree to an extent, but also I think that in the same way that a mother is born and reborn every time she has a baby, and a part of her kind of has to die every time that, when she has her baby, like the old version of her has to die to make room for this new version of her that can be this mother of this child. And this is not, this isn't an uncommon belief. Like a lot of people believe that. But what about the death of the father? Like a part of the father has, doesn't have to, but if there's an invitation to let a part go and to step into a, deeper role as provider, father, protector. And we can either shirk that responsibility by, sidestepping it or outsourcing it or, whatever. Or you can step into it and you can turn and be close and accept it and, be there for your woman and receive your child, and do that whole thing together and not, yeah, and that's all. But yeah, no, that's not meaning that you should never seek out support or that you can't seek out support or that it's, somehow not masculine to seek out some support and guidance at all. I think it's just like there's a balance there somewhere. What do you think?
I think that I'm a completely different person
Oh, yeah,
from the first birth to
for
the
sure.
second birth. And I know I'm going to be a completely different person for the third birth because you've
Mhm.
grown and developed and matured. And I absolutely agree. There's like the same thing for men. But I'm saying in terms of giving birth, and being the support person,
Yeah,
the husband there, like your number one mission
yeah.
in this whole thing is to make sure that you're being
Mhm.
supported and have the right surroundings to give
Oh,
you the
yeah,
experience
yeah,
to give a birth.
exactly.
And so if that means that, hey, I've tried the things that I've learned so
Yeah,
far, but I'm not outsourcing. I'm calling on friends and
yeah,
support to understand, hey, what do you think and suggest? Like
for
what
sure.
like and that's what I did with your sister or
Yeah,
with your friend or with your mom. And then your mom eventually came and supported. And so like outsourcing certain things isn't a bad thing. It allowed me to be more present and focus on you. And so by doing so, it
mhm,
allowed me to play that bigger role in, massaging you, or if there was something that like
mhm.
was bothering us, I could attend to it. Having other people, like especially your mom there, like if she couldn't handle it and maybe she was with you, then I could attend to like,
Yeah,
making sure your space was protected.
yeah,
And so that's the main
yeah,
goal. The main
absolutely.
mission is to make sure you feel safe, calm, your environment's protected, and you have
Mhm.
the right environment to birth
Yeah,
naturally.
absolutely.
And so I get what you're saying. And I agree that the male
Is
father is, you know,
by
a
doing all
death.
of that
Yeah.
by doing all of that, that is you stepping into your role as father.
Yeah.
It's when I think, like, a good example would be in my first birth when you didn't step
Yeah. No, I
into it,
didn't. Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
had looked outside and you thought, "Oh, midwives and nurses, you guys are gonna
Exactly.
take
Yeah.
care of her.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything." Like, it's not about doing, it's more just about the kind of person that you are sitting next to me and, holding the space for me and protecting my space and all that, and, like,
Yeah.
you did that in the second birth. I have to pee so bad, we might have to cut this short. Alright. Well, I think that this is a great place to end the convo for tonight, but we'll have you on again soon. This was really nice. I don't
Will
know
you
if
have
it'll
me
be
on again
I don't
soon?
know if it'll be soon, but at some point. This is really nice to get to talk to you and just spend some time
Yeah,
doing this kind of stuff.
that's it. That's the pod. No,
That's
no,
the
I'm
pod.
kidding.
Okay. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Your Redemptive Birth. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a review on your listening platform to help this podcast reach the women it needs to reach. If you have a redemptive birth story you would like to share, please email me at sarah@yourredemptivebirth.com. I would love to hear from you. Let's spread the redemptive birth word together.